Dear respected Thai, dear beloved community, today is the 4th of December in the year 2022, and we are in the lower hamlet of Plum village. It's a big community today in this hall. We have a lot of people arriving 2 days ago, right? And so many of you may not know me. My name is Sister Nghiem, Sister Insight, and I live in the new hamlet. And we are in our last week of the Rains Retreat. Some of you are coming this last week and are benefiting from the fruits of the practice that the Sangha had cultivated during the 3 months, 2.5, almost 3 months. And it had been a really powerful retreat this year, with a lot of young people attending the retreat for the whole 3 months. And our topic had been, the theme of the retreat had been applied Buddhism, engage Buddhism, how to apply the practice in our daily life, how to engage the practice in the world. And so my topic is continuing this theme on how to practice with the fear of death, how to practice dealing with grief. And when I was younger, I read stories as well as heard stories from my elders that for us as practitioners, that the moment of death is the moment that really reveals how we have been practicing in our life. And so death is a subject of contemplation for us. And that death is our biggest business as monastics. But also death is our biggest fear, right? It's the original fear, the existential fear that we all have inside. And also the fear of dying, is the base of all other fears, at least from my own experience. And what a good time to talk about death. Because it's getting darker and the leaves are falling off the trees. Like it's as if nature it's dying. It's dying slowly as the year is coming to an end. And grief is one of those things for us who are living to have a beloved ones who passes. For some of us nowadays, is the grief also over, the situation with our planet, with Mother Earth, with the the climate crisis as well. That's also a really real grief that we all experience. Grief and fear. So I hope this topic is not too grim for everybody or sadden you. And the pain of grief, it's not just emotional. Sometimes it could manifest as physical as well, such as heartache. You like a physical heartache, not just an emotional heartache. And we all experience grief at one point in our life, right? It's part of being human. And as we grow older, the older we are, the more grief we experience in our life. And so this is a topic that I have been facing and practicing. And for years I've been practicing on facing death as a preparation for the death of my mom, as well as for the death of Thai. And even when I was already a novice, I remember when I just ordained a couple months, and Thai got really, really sick. Thai didn't come to teach. Usually Thai was more diligent than us in terms of like coming to the activities, coming to teach during the day of mindfulness. And for a whole week, Thai wasn't able to come because Thai was really sick. And I got so afraid. I was so scared because I thought, well, I just ordained, I haven't learned much. And I'm not even able to take refuge in myself. I was taking refuge in Thai, I was taking refuge in the community, and if Thai passes, that would be really unbearable. But luckily, Thai didn't. Thai continued 30 years later. So I feel really fortunate that I have been in the presence of Thai for a long time and rubbing off his peace, his love, learning from his wisdom. And one of those things that Thai encouraged us to practice was practicing dying. And I thought, how in the world am I going to practice dying? Like being really young in my 20s, in my early 20s, in my early 30s, how do I practice dying? So one of those things that I did was when I go to bed, I told myself, okay, this is it. This could be my last moment. I am going to sleep and I may not wake up. And so going to sleep was like a dying process. And that was like a preparation for me, with that awareness that this is it. And it was a really good practice of letting go, I felt, because at the end of each day, I practice to let go because I know this may be the moment that I die. The moment I go to sleep might be the moment that I die. So that's how I have been practicing dying. And when I have like a lot of suffering inside, I also practice dying in a way that I let go of these. I let go of clinging onto my suffering. I let go from identifying with my suffering. Because if it were my last moment, well, I don't want to be like clinging onto my suffering, right? If I'm dying at that moment, right? So letting go of perception is another way that I practice dying. And that the grief that we experience from losing someone we love may stem from like regrets and guilts we have around our relationship with that person, things we have done or didn't do. Or we're losing our refuge, our emotional refuge, sometimes physical refuge as well. Physical comforts, someone that we seek for emotional comforts or physical comforts. And the death of that person would be like having no ground under our feet. But as we learned that suffering is good to some degree, the goodness of suffering, as we say it, that the fears of dying in us, as well as the grief of losing someone we love, could set us on a path, on a spiritual path, a path to heal ourselves, a path to confront our fears, a path to work with our grief. And sometimes this grief could be just like a transmission that we received, and that's my experience. When I became a nun, I had like this deep sadness, and I could not really pinpoint to where this sadness was coming from. And as a nun living in the community, my practice was to cultivate joy. And over the years, I thought, wow, I've transformed my grief or my sadness, like this deep sadness that felt like grief. But then every year, during this time of the year, in autumn, when the days are getting darker and the leaves are falling off the trees, I felt this deep, deep sadness. It's as if like a part of me is dying, like the dying leaves. And I kind of like that experience because it helps me to take refuge in the practice, and it helps me to look into impermanence. We all know that life is impermanent and we are impermanent. But it is something that we think we know and we think we understand. And we spend very little time contemplating on impermanence. And so for me, that's like a really, this experience of like deep sadness during autumn, it's an opportunity for me to come back to my practice, to take refuge in my practice, so that I can really experience impermanence as a real experience and not just ideas that I have in my head. And so every autumn, it was like that. And then one year, something clicked. And I realized, wow, this is not my sadness. This is actually my mom's sadness and grief. when I was 1.5 years old, my dad passed away. And then my mom was having a baby, my younger sister. And because my mom suffered so much that the baby also had passed away inside her, and she was also at the brink of death as well. And so you can imagine like enormous grief and suffering and sadness my mom was experiencing. And as a child, I was absorbing all that into my body and into my consciousness. So that grief that I was experiencing every autumn, that deep sadness, was actually my mom's. And that realization had really cracked me open. And I thought, wow, when I was living with my mom, I never realized that. I was never able to touch her suffering because I was too occupied with my own stuff. And so that realization really helped me to touch deep love for my mom and deep connection with her as well. And to really see that I'm a continuation of my mom. That now, with my practice, I can help to take care of my mom. And I can practice to take care of this grief and this sadness for my mom. So if you have like this deep kind of sadness that you can't really pinpoint, maybe it might be your parents suffering with sadness or grief. It might be your ancestors. And that taking care of this suffering, this grief, this sadness for ourselves, we are also taking care of theirs and supporting them. And it was that awareness that somehow transformed this sadness that I had. That autumn no longer brings up this grief or this sadness. And I realized that when there's no awareness of the causes and conditions of our suffering, there's no awareness of our roots, of who we are, the way we are, then this suffering becomes sort of like a background experience that's affecting the way we look at the world, the way we look at ourselves. And that it affects the quality of our being and the quality of our life as well. So bringing awareness to the causes and conditions of why we are the way we are, of why we suffer the way we do, is the key to help transform. One of the stories that one of the sutras that I really that I really like, that's been really in my mind a lot, and that's called the Divine Messengers that the Buddha had taught. And the story goes like this. There's a man who had really bad conduct in body, speech, and mind. In other words, he lived a life of neglect. And when he passed away, he went to the lower realm, to the hell realm, and he was brought to Yama. Yama is the Lord of Death, the King of Death. And so Yama was reprimanding him and then questioned him. He asked this man, didn't you ever see the divine messengers, the first divine messenger that appear among humans? And this man said, no, I've never. And Yama said, didn't you ever see a person who is sick, who has no strength, who has no vitality because of this sickness? And someone who could no longer able to take care of himself. And this man said, yes, I have seen this. And he said, that's divine messenger. That's the first divine messenger that appeared among us to remind us that we are of the nature to get sick. We are vulnerable as humans because of sickness. And that when we meet this messenger, it's a bell of mindfulness for us to see our own vulnerabilities, to see that we are of the nature to get sick. It's not just that person who is getting sick, but we can also become sick. And because of this awareness that we will live wholeheartedly, we live in a meaningful way, that we can let go of things that are really irrelevant, so that we can live deeply our life, living with kindness and love. And this man said, I've never thought of that. And so Yama went on to ask about the second divine messenger, which is old age. Someone who's in their 80s, 90s, someone who's, all wrinkling, whose teeth had fallen off, who could no longer support themselves. He said, yes, I have seen this. Well, didn't it ever occur to you that you are of the nature to grow old? And then he went on to ask this man about the third divine messenger. Have you ever seen the third divine messenger who appear among the humans? And the third divine messenger is death. Death is inevitable. And that we all have witnessed death. We all have witnessed old age and sickness. And that these people may be the divine messengers who are coming to remind us of our own vulnerabilities, of our own nature, the nature to die, the nature to grow old, the nature to be sick. And that with this awareness, we can live, we can make the determination to live in a way that we're not wasting our life right now, and that we can live our life with kindness and with love, and that we can savor every moment of our life deeply, knowing that we are of the nature to die, and that death is something inevitable, and that it could happen at any time. One time in the New Hamlet, this man came up to one of our elder sisters, and he said, dear sister, you don't remember me, but I had a consultation with you, and me and my wife were having a lot of difficulties, and we were thinking about having a divorce, but then you saved us. You saved our divorce. And then he said, you know what you taught? You know what you said? And yes, she didn't remember. She must have seen so many people over the years that she didn't remember what she said. And he said it. He repeated what she had said. He said, you said, life is short. Don't show your ugly faces. And that was like a mantra for him. Life is short. Don't show your ugly faces. We all have ugly faces. We all have beautiful faces. And we do have ugly faces too. Like the mud and the lotus is in us. And somehow in our daily life, we forget our lotuses. We tend to reveal the mud so much more. And we're creating suffering for ourselves and other people, our beloved ones. So life is short. Offer them the lotuses. Manage your mud so that they can become lotuses for yourself and for your beloved ones. And I thought that's a short version of this Divine Messenger Sutra, isn't it? And so even though I've been practicing Dayan for a long time and sort of preparing psychologically for the passing of my mom, for the passing of Thai, the two most important people in my life. And when my mom passed away, she was having a stroke for 7 years, and her body was no longer functioning. And when she passed away, I thought, it's good. It's good time, because the longer she's in a body that was no longer functioning, she only suffers, and we also. We cannot bear seeing her suffering in this sick body. And so I was really at peace with it. And when she passed away, she was really at peace. She had a smile on when she passed away. And I was really at peace, because I have done everything I could to support her, to accept her death, to accept, her physical state. And during the time that I was taking care of my mom, I was so aware that her death, if she passes away, that is not necessarily her death that would eat my inside, but it would be the guilt and the regrets of not doing things or doing things that would make her, that could make her suffer. So I was really aware of that, and so I was always showing my best to my mom, being really supportive, encouraging her, and really reminding her all the time that. She's a precious bell of mindfulness for all her children, so that we can live beautifully, live with kindness, and with love to one another and to other people. But then after she passed away, like after she was passing, away in Vietnam at the house where, I was brought up, where I was born. And we had all our relatives, our Sangha members too, from the root temple. We were from Hue. And so I was really at peace, and everyone was really happy that everything had been really smooth, really peaceful. The family was really loving and really caring towards one another. And then I went back to the community. And when I went back to community, that's when I experienced like deep grief. I felt deep grief. And one of those things that really triggered my grief was the fact that I would never, ever again touch her physical presence, and hug her, and talk to her, and listen to her voice. That was like the most difficult thing for me. And I remember just a month after she passed away, I was leading a retreat in Italy. It was a hiking retreat. And my mom loved hiking. And so I was hiking for her, and she was, hiking with me for the whole week. And it was a really deep practice of coming in touch with her, deep practice of coming in touch with her inside myself. And then at the end of the retreat, we were, to share our experience of the retreat. And I was sharing about my practice with my mom, and I was like, I burst out in tears. And my siblings know that this is not something very unusual about me, bursting out in tears, around the death of my mom, that I had burst out in tears so many times. Even in front of the community, I'm quite good now, even though I know I'm a bit emotional and I know tears are coming, but you see, I'm quite calm, right? Anyway, so after that sharing, a young man came up to me and said, "Sister, is there the teaching of impermanence in Buddhism?" And I thought, I knew it wasn't the question that he was asking. It was more like, why are you crying when life is impermanent? That was like what he was trying to tell me. Because, this guy was a practitioner, a young man, and I don't know if he ever experienced death before. But I didn't say anything. I don't know how to respond to that question. And but just because you know that life is impermanence, and that death is not the end, that doesn't mean that you become cold turkey, right? That you still grieve over the loss of your beloved ones. Can I have some tissue? It's my eyes are watery and it's kind of itchy. Can I have a piece of? Maybe we will listen to one sound of the bell to breathe. So, grief, sadness is a very important part of healing, because it is this grief and this sadness that we learn how to go deeply inside ourselves to understand ourselves, to understand grief, to understand death and dying. And that it is a divine messenger, like the Buddha had said. And so in the midst of this grief with my mom, we were on retreat with Thai to Spain. That was maybe a month or two after my mom passed away, and I was still grieving. I was still looking for my mom, in a sense, looking for my mom inside myself, and questioning, where is she now? Where's my mom now? And going in to touch her, because I know I'm a continuation of my mom. And that she had left me in the world to continue her, to carry her into the future. And I was sitting on stage with the Sangha, and Thai was sitting, right in here, giving a talk, and the monastic was sitting on the floor, on the stage. And the whole time that Thai was talking, I didn't listen to Thai. I was listening to my grief. I went inside, and I breathed, and I was holding and embracing this deep grief that I was having. And I was just experiencing this rawness of the grief and the sadness, without trying to run away, without, reasoning it away or thinking it away, but simply be in the midst of that, sort of like in the midst of the storm of grief that was raging inside me. And breathing with it was the only thing that I could do, to keep me grounded, to keep me not overwhelmed by the grief of this big loss. And all of a sudden I felt like this, somehow, just like shedding the light of mindfulness onto this big pain in me. It's like having a laser directing at this pain. Somehow this pain kind of it losing its intensity. And it was dissipating right in front of me. Like there's this opening inside of me, and this block of pain that I was experiencing was no longer there. And I felt this openness in my psyche, in my mind, in my body. And I opened my eyes and looked into the audience. And it dawned on me that these people here, that I was looking at. Might have been once upon a lifetime. My mom, my dad, my siblings, people that I have grieving so much over so many lifetimes. That they may be right here in front of me. And there I was, like seeking for my mom. And I may have done this for countless lifetimes, seeking for my mom. And here they are, right in front of me. Because the Buddha said that we have gone through birth and death, countless lifetimes. And that we are deeply connected, intimately connected. And that the people we are encounter in our lifetime, they may have been our parents, once upon a lifetime. And so that was really an eye-opening experience for me. And what I realized was that, I love my mom a lot, and I want to be there for my mom. And yet here are people that I want to love and to be there as I have been wanting to be there for my mom. Because these people may be the people that I have been looking for or wanting to look for, in the previous lifetimes, countless lifetimes. And so it's an experience that helped me to really open my heart to people around me and not to take them for granted. Just like I have taken my mom for granted for so many years. And we all have, right? We all have taken granted of our parents for so long. It's only at their death that we feel, oh my gosh, I haven't really looked at them deeply. I wasn't really there for them. And somehow that had really filled up that hole in my soul. The hole of not having my mom anymore. And so Thai said, a cloud never dies. A cloud only transforms into different forms. That a cloud can never really die. It can just manifest in different forms, just like us. We can never die. Death is just an idea we have. That our beloved ones is already there. In so many different forms. We just need to have the eyes to recognize her or him in her different forms. The year that my mom passed away was also the year that Thai got really sick. So my mom passed away in April, and when I came back to the Sangha, Thai, I went to visit Thai, and Thai said, Thai is still here for you, and Thai gave me a hug, and I was. And then several months later, Thai got sick. And then Thai turn into a cloud recently. And Thai had given us several years to prepare for Thai's departure. And I really took those years seriously, really to practice. Practice to be a refuge for myself. Practice to take refuge in the island of myself. In other words, practice to take refuge in the practice and in the teacher inside me. Thai always wanted us to not take refuge in Thai, but to find the teacher inside our heart and mind. And for me, the teacher inside me is really my energy of mindfulness and concentration and insight. That's my teacher inside me. Because when I am mindful, I know Thai is there in my heart and mind. And this is what Thai is transmitting to us. The energies of mindfulness, concentration, and the insight. And when Thai passed away, even though we were expecting it, that it would come sooner or later, and we were really fortunate that we had so many years, and yet it was really difficult for me. I was in tears all the time during that week we had the ceremony. And my friends were sending me, messages and like they're there for me. And I didn't realize, why were they all sending me these messages? And later on I realized that I was sitting in front and my face was right at the camera. And so this face with teary face was all over the world. And so my friends everywhere were writing to me with these consoling words and messages. And so even though I prepared for it, and even though it's really good for Thai to leave, because like my mom, Thai's body was no longer functioning. That he had to depend on tubes and, to keep his body moving. And that it was the right time for Thai to go. It was still really painful. It was still a loss. And that we're not just cold and reserved. Maybe being cold or reserved, maybe a denial, or maybe suppression. And these are not really healthy ways to deal with grief and sadness and loss. And that Thai's passing is really a bell of mindfulness for us. To see Thai, to recognize Thai. In different forms. In other words, to really recognize Thai's consciousness. Thai is no longer there in his body, but Thai's consciousness continues in us, in my siblings, in you all, in the trees, in the sunshine, because these are things that have been really important elements for Thai to cultivate joy, peace, solidity, elements that had been nourished in Thai. And so when you are in Plum Village, you can really see Thai's consciousness manifesting everywhere, wherever you turn, whether it's a sister or a brother, whether it's the sound of the bell, whether it's the clock that chimes, whether it's a lay friend who walks mindfully and peacefully. Those are manifestations of Thai. And as much as you want to bow deeply to Thai, you can bow to these people because they are a continuation of Thai. And one of those things that Thai said was not to build a stupa for Thai. And Thai said, Thai is not in the stupa. Neither is outside of the stupa. But if there is really a Thai to look for, that it is our conscious breathing and mindful steps. And that when we are taking this breath consciously and making steps with peace, well, Thai is there. Thai is making those steps with us. Thai is breathing with us. So our practice of coming back to ourselves, our practice of taking refuge in the practices to cultivate mindfulness, concentration, and insights helps to keep Thai alive in this world, in our hearts, in our mind. Maybe we can have a sound of the bell to breathe. Let us breathe and recognize Thai in us with this breath. Recognize Thai in this awareness of our body. So practices that could help us embrace the pain and the grief of losing someone dear to us, as well as practices that help us to face our own death. The first practice is taking refuge in the Sangha. When we lose someone we love, it feels as if we're losing everything. And to have a community of practice that are there to support us to go through that grief is so precious and so important. And that's a time when you feel like the Sangha is actually carrying you forward. coming in touch with Mother Earth is another practice that I do. Where's my mom now? Well, part of her is becoming the earth. The earth had witnessed her presence. And that the earth had brought us into life. And now the earth, she's going back to the earth. She's becoming a part of the earth. And that the earth is really our mother. She's always there, loving and caring. She's always there offering her love and her freshness and her beauties for our own nourishment, our own survival. And that Mother Earth is not just outside of ourselves, because the earth element is in here. Mother Earth is also in here. That awareness helps us to see our deep connection with Mother Earth. And that awareness helps us to do whatever we can, whether big or small, to protect Mother Earth. And yesterday, these last 2 days, our long-term friends in the new hamlet had made a really big offering to the new hamlet community. Not just our lay friends, but also Sangha members from abroad. And they planted 120 trees to the community. So we planted the forest and a lot of trees, fruit trees and all kinds of trees. And it brought so much joy to everybody. And so it's this awareness of our intimate connection with the earth that motivated us to do something like that as a way to give back to Mother Earth, as a way to protect Mother Earth. Taking refuge in the island of self is another practice. You know the word. Embracing the Dharma doors, the practices. That the practices are our refuge. That we are not dependent on other people for our happiness and our peace and our transformation. That it is the practice and the teachings that help us to transform our suffering and to cultivate joy and happiness in our life. And it is the insight that comes from the practice that helps to transform our grief, our sadness, our fears. And it is the practice that helps us tap into mindfulness, the energy of mindfulness. And also helps us to touch life here and now. So, all the practices that we've been doing here and we're learning and practicing here in Plum Village are really to cultivate, to water, to make manifest the energies of mindfulness, concentration and insight. When there's mindfulness, we are present, we are there. We're not running away. And when we are there, then we begin to see. We see really deeply. And this seeing is not coming from our knowledge, our intellect. It comes from our mind. It comes when our mind is calm and clear. calm and clear because we are there, we are present. And so the practice of mindful breathing, it's so instrumental in helping us to be present. One of my younger sisters asked me a question. She said, whenever I have an emotion or a suffering, and I come back to the breath, I feel like I can't come in touch very deeply with my suffering. And I think this is an experience, or this is the thinking of many of us. But the breathing, when you come back to the breathing and take refuge on the breath, the first thing that happens is that you're taking your mind down from leaving it up here, with all its stories and thoughts and perceptions and ideas, like these endless, the non-stop radio thinking station, right? So that we can just turn down that non-stop thinking radio station. And the breath helps us to be here and now. So, the suffering that we experience, a large part of it comes because we are dwelling in our non-stop thinking radio station. That we are thinking. We think we can think it away, or we think we can think it deeply to understand it. But the more we think, the more we are so far away from the present moment to really experience it for what it is. So when we are able to quiet our thinking, this experience of suffering is not too bad. When we are looking at this experience for what it is in the present moment, it's manageable. Right? The suffering is not too bad. It's our thinking that makes it really horrible and difficult and overwhelming. Stories in our head. Stories that we have, created. Stories that have been transmitted to us. Stories that have been told to us. And we kind of take refuge in these stories as our realities or realities. And that letting go of these stories could feel quite threatening. It's like, who am I without these stories? These stories define me, who I am. And without these stories, it's like losing my ground. And the breath helps us to be in the present moment and not believe in these stories and not getting carried away in these stories, so that we can experience whatever it is that's here in this present moment, whether it's my grief, my fears, or this big loss, this hole in my soul, so that I can experience them for what it is. And these stories are really second arrows that we are shooting at ourselves. So the Buddha talked about the second arrows. When an arrow comes and shoots us, it's painful. It's super painful. But when a second arrow is shooting at us at the same place, the pain is not just double, it could be multifold. And so the grief and the pain of losing someone we love is very painful. But we are we're shooting second arrows at us, with all these regrets and all these guilts and with all these stories, and it made it unbearable. And it's not just our grief or our sadness, but all kinds of suffering that we experience. And so the breath helps us to stay here now in this present moment so that we can face whatever it is, and we can face it in a very deep way. The breath helps us to come in touch with the present moment. And that it is in the present moment that allow us to find everything that we're looking for. Whatever it is that we're looking for, it's here in the present moment. Even someone we loved who is no longer there, like, my mom, Thai, that it is in the present moment that I'm able to touch them deeply in myself and around me. In the present moment that I'm able to touch Thai inside myself and to touch my siblings, Thai in my siblings and in people who are embodying the teachings and practices. It is in the present moment that we see ourselves a continuation. Not seeing ourselves, intellectually, but an experience, a deep experience, a direct experience of us being the continuation of our beloved ones. But also in the present moment that we see we are being continued in countless ways through our body, speech, and mind, through actions of body, speech, and mind. And at this moment, we are all breathing together. It's as if I feel as if we are like one big body, expanding and contracting. And in this space, we can touch peace, we can touch joy, we can touch love, and we can touch our beloved teacher, Thai. So thank you everyone for being on this path, being on this beautiful journey together, and supporting each other on the path of healing, in the path of continuing our beloved teacher. Thank you very much for listening.